All right, pleased to be joined now by the head coach at Pitt, Randy Waldrum. Coach, thanks so much for taking some time here this morning.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Well, let's kind of just go back to taking the job at Pitt. And what was it about the job that intrigued you and thought that you could have some success here?
It's an interesting story if you've got a moment, but
We've got time, brother. Let's do it.
okay. Well, I've got to be honest, and I've even said this to my athletic director. Um, if you would have asked me, I'm starting my fourth season here. So if you would have asked me 5 years or 6 years ago if I would have ever coached at Pitt, I would have told you no. I just wouldn't have. And the reason being is, I spent all those years at Notre Dame, and we played Pitt, every year, and the program at Pitt was not very good. We would beat them handily most every time. Uh, my only experience with Pitt was when we would come play them. We played at some park, Founders Field, somewhere outside of Pittsburgh. I never got to see the campus. Not one time did I ever see the campus. Because we'd always play Pitt, and then we'd go to West Virginia. That was our two legs there, right? So we would just go to Founders Field, which was an awful facility. So I just never had a high perception of Pitt and the commitment to women's soccer or anything else. And interesting, what happened is after I left the Dash, I was kind of looking to get back into the college game, and I had seen where Pitt had hired Jay Vidovich, our men's coach. And I thought, man, Jay's won championships, like we have. And, he went to the pros like I did, and now sees at Pitt. I said, something's had to have changed, because they couldn't get a coach like that. So when Heather reached out about the possibility of coming to Pitt, I spoke to Jay for a couple of hours, and he kind of explained the differences and talked about the new facility on campus and those kind of things. And so, I said, sure, then I'll come take a look. And when I got here, I was just, honestly, I was blown away, because number one, I didn't realize the academics of the university were as strong as they are. And I didn't realize the degree in the fields of study that I know you could recruit kids for, right? And then when I saw the facility on campus, there still were a few things we needed to improve, but gosh, it was such a drastic change from Founders Field. And I loved Heather's vision and the commitment to the Olympic sports. And then the fact that, Pitt's playing in the ACC, and as difficult as I know that conference is, because I do strongly feel we're the best conference, really without question, in the country, historically, year in and year out. I knew the road would be tough, because Pitt had a program for 22 years and only had 2 winning seasons. So I knew it was an uphill climb, but I was up for the challenge. I started the program at Baylor back in the mid 90s. And so I know what it's like to start from scratch. And that's basically what we had to do here. So I think I was just ready for the challenge, and the fact that, it was in a major conference and a Power 5 school. I had confidence in myself and in our staff that we could turn this thing, and we're slowly getting it there. But probably quicker than maybe a lot would have expected. But when you're in it every day, you want it to happen right now. But that's kind of the backstory. I'd have to be honest and tell you, I never thought I've been here, 5 years ago. But now that I'm here, it's been a great place to be.
Man, you took a couple of topics right off, because I was going to ask about them hiring Jay and bringing that in. So you've already addressed that. But I want to talk about the differences between starting the program at Baylor and at Pitt, because when you're starting the program, you're going to invest in it, because you don't just do it to have a program, is my guess.
Right.
You're going to invest in it. At Pitt, it probably took a similar investment to kind of reinvigorate the program.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is at Baylor, there was no program there in place. So we literally started from scratch. So there was kind of that excitement and energy of this is your baby, you're starting it from the beginning, and you're making everything you do, you're making your own history, right? And now it brought a different set of problems, because you didn't have a current team to select from. We had a club team on campus, and I think we ended up keeping 2 or 3 of the club players, after taking a look at them. But you didn't really have anything to go by. So you're really hitting the recruiting trail hard. And Luckily, recruiting back then in the mid 90s was a little different than it is today because you were still recruiting seniors, instead of sophomores. So I was able to get a good class in, from day one. That probably would have been next to impossible to do in today's climate, since recruiting is 2 years out. It would have been hard to get the kind of players we did back at Baylor. But the difference being here is, we took a program and so I had players. Now they weren't players that were really capable of playing in the ACC, and that's quite frankly why they made the change. And the players weren't good enough, but I at least had 5 or 6 that I could build around. We inherited that team in 18. I didn't have a chance to recruit anything because of the 2 years in advance of recruiting. We just kind of, that first year, we took what we inherited and we got a lot of gray hairs and went through a season, with those players and tried to get the best out of them that we could. And I do think we improved the group. I think we got a couple more wins than we normally had, but we didn't win a single game with that group in the ACC. So what we decided is to just blow it up and start all over from scratch. And the hard part with this one compared to Baylor was you're battling 22 years of losing history, and you've got to sell the kids on it's going to be different. Things are going to be different. And so I think what we were able to do is find some players that, quite honestly, if nothing else, just believed in us and our staff that we could turn it, based on our history, because we couldn't sell them on the history of the program. It was easy to sell the academics of the university, but there were so many options for kids to go to nowadays. It's like they really were investing in, Randy, I believe in you, and I believe in what you've done historically and what Ben and Dustin can bring, as a staff. And the other thing that we did too is we kind of went foreign. We got some international players, Canada being close, the Toronto area being just a few hours away. We got in some players like Amanda West and Anna Bout that really helped us turn the program quicker than it would have been if we had just found the U.S. kids, because we weren't going to get the top rated U.S. kids to come to Pitt with the kind of record that we've had of 22 years of losing. So I think that was a big key in turning it a little bit, is getting some foreign players in here.
You talked a little bit about how early recruiting is and how difficult it is, and what other ways, what are some other challenges in terms of recruiting, and how has that changed? You've alluded to it a little bit, but how has it changed?
Well, I think the hard part was, a lot of the kids today even don't know what we accomplished at Notre Dame. They don't know that we played in 8 Final Fours in my 14 years, and we won a couple of national championships, because that was, back in 2010. So they don't know.
Oh my gosh, so ancient.
So but their parents know. So if the parents were involved in the recruiting process, or the players really did their homework, or had club coaches that really were invested in the recruiting process, then we got help in those areas, right? But for those kids that didn't know and didn't have people that could help them understand, they're just looking online at our record and going, oh my gosh, wow, only won 4 games, or only won 3 games, or only won 5 games. And then you start going back through the history and you're going, wow, this team hasn't won. I don't have an interest in that, right? So we had to battle that. That's an issue. We had to battle the 22 years of previous history. And, and then I think, one thing we weren't sure of is I've never worked on a more urban type campus where it's more of a city, although we're not downtown like DePaul or like Boston, BU is, we are 5 minutes from downtown. So it has more of an urban setting. And I didn't have any idea really when I took the job, because I'd never worked on a campus like this. Would that be a detriment? Would that be a plus? And what we found is it really hasn't hurt us at all, because I think this part of the country, kids are used to this, right? Whereas maybe in the South, they're not. They're used to spread out large campuses that sit out on their own. And now, the flip side is we found that a lot of kids like the city because there's things to do, and that was one thing that, we struggle with at times, even at Notre Dame, was we have the campus, but if you wanted to do anything, you had to get in your car and drive downtown to South Bend, which is not a thriving metropolis by any means, or I've got to drive an hour and a half to go to Chicago, right? If I want to really do something and get out. So, it's kind of a catch-22. You can find the positives with both those kind of settings, but we found that didn't really hurt us too badly at all. And kids wanted to come. The internationals love it because they feel it's a lot like Europe. And so they wanted to come. So I think the biggest thing, honestly, that we battled is just the history, it's just getting people to believe that we were going to be able to change it.
You talked about Amanda West. We'll get to her in a little bit, but kind of keeping with the theme, how important was it to get a local player like Ellie? That how has that signaled maybe an arrival might be a little bit premature, but in
Yeah.
terms of capturing the attention and having the local support,
Yeah.
how important was getting a player like her?
Well, it was extremely important for a couple of reasons. One is, first and foremost, she's a great player, and keeping a really good player at home, is certainly a priority that we have. And so just getting the quality of the person and the player that you got with Ellie, anybody that knows her can attest to what she brings, not only on the field, but off the field, her character and everything else. So that was really important from that standpoint. But I think the other thing was when we got here in 2018, I can remember the first time I immediately I got here in January, and I immediately went out to one of the indoor facilities where they were having one of the local clubs was having a showcase event. And I remember walking in and the coaches there looking at me going like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Well, I'm recruiting. What do you mean? What am I doing here?" And they're going, "Randy, we haven't seen a Pitt coach at any of our events in 6 years." Right. So there was a really bad relationship with University of Pittsburgh and the local clubs and the local soccer community. I mean, to a point where honestly, the clubs were telling their kids, "Don't go to Pitt." Like, Pitt's recruiting me. Well, I wouldn't go there. Right. And so we had to change that and really kind of rebuild that relationship. And, we got lucky in a couple of regards because one of the clubs here, Randy Rom coaches in the club where she played for me at Notre Dame. So as soon as she heard I took the job, then immediately within her club, it's like, okay, things will change now. So she felt good about, hey, now, yes, the best kids. And that's why we got Landy Mertz, for example, the transfer kid coming in. I tried to recruit her when I first got here, but she had already committed to Dayton. And as soon as she decided to transfer, then it was a no-brainer. She was going to come here. But she wasn't looking at Pitt at all, really, before because of the clubs and the lack of support. So it was important that we changed that. And I think we've gotten 10 or 11 local kids now. And I think we got not every one of the best, but I think we've got most of the best kids now coming to us. And so I think over these last 3 or 4 years, especially credit to Ben and Dustin, the two of our assistants. Ben's our associate head coach, but they really hit the ground running on this and really mended a lot of those fences in the local community. And I think now the perception is completely different. I mean, we had an 11 a.m. game, Sunday against TCU, and the place was packed, so that wasn't the case 2 years ago, I assure you. So I think it's been vital to us to get those local kids and get them staying in town and rebuilding those relationships.
You started to see a little bit of the progress last year, even though it was such an odd year. How did you approach the year from a development standpoint, and has that maybe given you a little momentum here coming into this season?
Yeah. Well, I think two things. One is I'm a big proponent of a 2-semester model, and it gave us 2 semesters to play and train and do it properly, where we could train all week, and play a game on the weekend, especially in the spring. Because the fall we still play 2 games a week in the ACC, and the fall was a little bit different too because so many schools didn't play that you'd have to go play somebody and play the same team twice, and you'd normally never do that, right?
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a different year, but it did give us an opportunity to really experience what a 2-semester model was like and the training and the preparation that you could do without having to worry about, especially in the spring, without having to worry about 2 games every week, right? And so you got more training days out of it. I think the important thing for us was in 20, we made a lot of growth and improvement even from 2019 and Amanda West's first year in 2019. So in 2020, we brought in another 8 or 10 recruits. And so our program was much improved. And I think we saw that in some of the results in the ACC, you know, and as we started winning some more games now and competing really well, you know, we dropped an overtime game that we played extremely well in against Clemson. And I think what happened is our kids saw that we could compete, you know, with the best in the country on a given day. And I think that was really important going into this season. And then when we added Ellie and her class, the 21s, and then bringing in, we got Ashton Gordon that transferred in from Arkansas. We got Landy Mertz that transferred in. Our team has even improved. I mean, we have 4 and sometimes 5 new starters, even from last year into our team this year. So the growth these last 2 years has been phenomenal.
You got to see a little bit of that with that really impressive win against at Oklahoma State. And
Yeah.
what impressed me about that was you were down a goal. You know, you
Yeah.
had the lead, and then they scored right at the beginning of that second half.
Yeah.
And does that kind of victory signal a little bit of the change? I mean, because you beat a ranked team on
Yeah.
their field and in a deficit, and many years before it had been like, well, here we
Yeah.
go. But then,
Yeah.
you know, you're able to get that job done.
Yeah, I keep saying that was the first one we really got over the hump. You know, like we'd taken some of these top teams to overtime and then we'd ultimately lose. But I think where it started, to be honest, a little bit is, you know, we went in preseason, went down to Ohio State, and I wanted to make that trip difficult. You know, normally you go the day before and you play the game, you know, the next day. And we waited, we hopped on the bus the day of the game. We were in a rain delay a couple of hours. And so it was a really, for a one-day trip playing a quality opponent, we put them in a difficult position. And we actually got a 2-0 win at a really good Ohio State team. And I think that gave us a lot of confidence going in. And then when we got to Oklahoma State, listen, they were a really good team, and they could have, the 2 they scored on us were, to your point, were really quick in the second half, and they were back-to-back goals just within a couple of minutes. And, you know, we could have really folded. And, you know, we came back and got the tying goal and then beat them in overtime. And the one thing we found with this team the last couple of years is we've fought back several times from 2-goal deficits over the last 2 years, but we never came away with the win, right? We'd fight our way back, and then we'd either end up tying the game or we'd lose it in overtime. And so this one was a big win for that regard, to see that we could do it on the road. But even more impressive to me was the fact that when you look at it statistically, I mean, we had about 60-something% of the possession in that game. And we know that you can win that possession battle and still lose. We understand that, right? But we went in and we didn't just sit in and counterattack and steal a win, right? It was a win that I felt like it was a solid win. Now, having said that, they countered us very effectively on the day, and we dodged some bullets. We could have as easily lost that game too. But I think from the statistical category and the way we played, it was great to see that we could do that against a good team. And so, yeah, I think that was a big turning point for us, and a big win on the road.
You talked about the TCU game. That was a tough one at home, but obviously well played. It was just 1-0. And you got a couple of non-conference games before you get into the heart of your ACC schedule. So what have you learned about your team? What did you take away from that game against TCU? What are you going to look forward here this week?
Yeah, well, I was a little disappointed in TCU because I didn't think we played as well as we could have. You know, I think part of that was credit to TCU because they're a very good side. They're hyper athletic in every position. And so that matchup, just from that standpoint, was a difficult one for us. And our kids fought, and they battled hard. And, you know, with a little luck, I mean, they cleared one off the line in the first half, and keeper made a couple of saves late in the half that, you know, we had chances that we could have been up one or more at half. And having said that, they could have scored a couple too. So it was one of those hard fought back and forth games. And, you know, a lot of respect for what they're doing down there with their program over the last few years. But it was a good measuring stick, because what it did is it exposed us in some areas that we haven't been exposed before. Some even different than what Oklahoma State were able to expose us on. So I think it'll better prepare us, you know, for Clemson in a couple of weeks. Now, as you mentioned, we got 2 more games that we got to focus on now. But looking at the ACC, the difference is you get a Oklahoma State, TCU every week in the ACC. You don't really get a breather, So unlike other conferences where you may have 1 or 2 big games in the season, we literally get it pretty much every week, And so I think our kids they know what's coming. They're used to it. I think the young ones that are here this year, like Ellie, haven't played in those kind of games yet. So these 2 games were really good games for them. And hopefully we'll be, better prepared for the ACC because of these 2 games. If you would have asked me before the season, knowing that we had 8 non-conference games and knowing we were going on the road to Oklahoma State and TCU at home, provided we can win the next 2 games, and that's not a given. We're not taking anybody lightly, but if we're lucky enough to finish 7-1 out of those 8 games, if you would have asked me before the season if I would take it, I would have said, yeah, let's just give it to me. We won't play the games, because it's the schedule that we've had so far has been a good one for us in non-conference. So I'm where we are, although I wasn't really pleased with the overall performance Sunday. I was pleased that we were in a game against, the top team, one of the top teams in the country, and we played right there with them. So from that standpoint, I'm happy with where we are.
Tell me a little bit about kind of chasing these firsts here. You talked about the 22 years of losing at Pitt, and as you are pursuing, trying to make a dent in the ACC and get to the ACC tournament, and obviously the NCAA tournament's the goal. How exciting and invigorating is it to have those firsts ahead of you?
Yeah. Well, and that's something we talk about a lot with our team. When we came in, we didn't really set our goals on. A lot of teams come into preseason and they say we want to win the national championship, and they realistically have no chance of winning a national championship. So we kind of set our goals in 3 parts. We kind of said we want to win as many. We have non-conference. We want to win as many of those games as we can. If we can go 8-0, that's the goal, right? But we have to win it as many as we can in that phase. And then we're almost getting close to the tail end of that phase, and we're pretty much accomplishing, I think, where we want to be in this first phase. I think the second phase then obviously is your conference play. And I think our key there is we want to keep getting more wins in conference than we've had. And each year we've kind of added a little bit more in the win column. I think we let a couple slip away last year. We felt like on the day we were better than Virginia Tech, and we lost that game. We felt like we weren't very good on the day against Wake Forest, and we lost that game. But we felt like those were games that were winnable. They're very good teams, but we feel like we're right there with them. So I think this year, the goal is obviously when we get to the second piece, we've got to win more than 1 or 2 ACC games, right? We feel like we're more of a middle of the pack. We feel like we belong in the middle of the pack with the ACC now, right? And so now we have to prove that and back that up by getting some wins. I haven't really set the goal, in terms of making the ACC tournament. Obviously, we'd love to do that, but we also understand they take only 6 teams this year in the ACC. And to me, you've got 4 teams that are clearly a notch above, everybody else. And then I think there's a lot of us kind of in that next 5 to 10 range, and so we want to be as high in that as we can, because I think we can make the NCAA tournament without making the ACC tournament, right? And that's been proven over the last decade that will happen. So I think our goal is the NCAA tournament is the bigger picture goal for us, right? If we can get to the ACC tournament, great, we want to do that. But I think our bigger picture is NCAA tournament. So that's kind of how we've broken the season down and trying to focus just in the moment with these 3 parts. So we haven't really talked to them too much yet about the ACC. Everything now is really focusing on this week's game and finishing out this part, as strong as we can.
All right, last one, I'll let you go, but just tell me a little bit about Amanda West. I mean, what a terrific player, outstanding numbers. I mean, it's probably when it's all said and done, will be, the one. Hopefully, I'm
Yeah,
sure to
yeah,
follow her, but
right.
just about getting her there, having her believe, and her production.
Well, she's from a very what I call professional family. Her dad was a pro hockey player in the NHL, and so they get the idea. They understand competition, and they understand teams and records and all that stuff. And I think the one thing that she bought into was us as a staff. Um, she wants to play pro, and I think she felt very strongly that I could help create that environment to get her there. And the other thing is, I think she wanted to be a part of building something. She said, I don't want to just go be another person that played for North Carolina. And, that's kind of where we've made our mark, is finding players like that, like an Ellie Caulfield that chose to do that too. Like, I want to be a part of building this. I don't want to be just another one. And not every player's like that, but those players in particular have. But Amanda has meant really everything to us. I think obviously she's carried the torch for us these first few years. And the good thing now is we've got other players like a Sarah Shapansky, a great talent, getting Landy Mertz in here, Emily Harrigan, Leah Pace. Those players could start for most any team in college. And now we've added that along with Amanda. So these first few years, teams have been able to really, especially the good teams, have really been able to kind of try to lock Amanda down. And credit to her, she still finds ways to score. But they are, they have focused on her so much. I think this year now we're going to be able to free her up a little bit because we got other weapons, just besides Amanda. Now, we played Sunday. I don't know if you're aware, but we played Sunday without her against TCU. She had an injury. And, would it have changed the game? It certainly wouldn't have hurt. It would have helped to have had her, and could she have made a difference, based on her history? I would hope so. But I think on the day we lost to a team that was just a little bit better than us on the day. So I never would want to use that as an excuse, but certainly we miss her when she's not there. And I think that's the first game she's missed in her career. And more precaution so we have her in the long term than anything else to hold her out. So she should be ready to go. But a great person, great player, good, really good leader for us. Everything that a coach dreams about having in their team, she is that and probably more. Yeah.
All right, Coach Pitt, off to a great start this season. Best of luck the rest of the way. Thanks so much for your time.
All right. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.